Welcome to this rapid revision video looking at the process of consolidating Hitler's power. How did Hitler establish dictatorship? Before we get started, and kind of as I expected, it is becoming increasingly hard to get these videos onto YouTube without them being demonetized and depromoted. That's hardly surprising given the content of them. However, hopefully it's obvious from watching them that I'm not in any way promoting any of these ideas, I'm simply educating about them, and in line with the GCSE syllabus. If you're finding these videos really helpful, please really do like the videos and subscribe to the channel. It helps make it all worthwhile, this extra work that I've been doing, but also it'll help other students find this work and also help them with the revision too. So if you can do that as a little thank you to me, I'd be really appreciative. Okay, let's get into it. This time we're looking at the timeline to dictatorship. As we did with the lesson looking at the timeline to chancellorship, we'll keep a timeline on this side of the screen. We know how the story starts. Hitler was made Chancellor in January 1933. We know how the story ends. August 1934, Hitler is dictator of Germany. It's the bits in between that we'll track along this timeline to help you keep up. You can pause this video as many times as you like if you're making notes, but ultimately everything will be put in chronological order on this side of the screen, so keep an eye on it. In January 1933, Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, but his power was far from secure. Hindenburg could sack him at any time, and his support in elections appeared to be declining. Over the next 20 months, he would go through a process of securing his power. Some actions were deliberate Nazi actions, some actions were used by the Nazis for their advantage, and this is the story of how the last embers of German democracy were sadly extinguished. The first key event was the Reichstag Fire. The Reichstag caught fire on February the 27th, 1933. It was quickly blamed on a Dutch communist called Marianus van der Lubbe. He confessed and was executed. Some have suggested that the Nazis set the fire themselves, as it was so politically useful for them, though this is nowhere near proved. The fire was distressing and outrageous to patriotic Germans. It was seen as an attack on the country by communists. Hitler took full advantage of this fear and outrage. 4,000 communists were immediately arrested. Hitler pressured Hindenburg into supporting so-called emergency or temporary laws to establish control. Notice how they're in inverted commas. It shows that they weren't actually temporary at all. These included the Decree for the Protection of the People and State. This gave Hitler power to imprison opponents and ban communist newspapers. He also took control of the police. Hitler used this to round up opponents, but also forced the police to ignore SA violence to his advantage. Hindenburg supported Hitler. The next key event was the March 1933 elections. Amidst the fear and outrage of the Reichstag fire, Hitler sought to secure more power in the Reichstag. He called an election on the 5th of March 1933, although it wasn't really a free election as there had been before. His strategy, though, was successful. The Nazis secured 288 seats and 44% of the vote, their most successful result ever, just short of an outright majority. The Nazis secured the support of other nationalist parties and banned the 81 communist deputies to secure a 2/3 working majority in the Reichstag, which would effectively allow them to do what they wanted. Having control of a majority would allow Hitler to alter the Weimar Constitution, and that was his next move. What we get now is the Enabling Act. Now Hitler had a majority in the Reichstag, he made his big move towards seizing personal power. On March the 24th, the Reichstag approved the Enabling Act. This said that the cabinet could pass new laws on its own, without the Reichstag. These new laws could override the Weimar Constitution, and the Chancellor, i.e. Hitler, would propose new laws. This killed German democracy. The Nazis' opponents were outnumbered and could not stop it. The communists had been banned from the Reichstag, and some members of the SPD were hospitalised by SA beatings in the election. The law passed, 444 votes for to 94 against. Hitler wasn't done yet though. He used the Enabling Act to set about banning opposition. As Hitler could now pass laws without Reichstag approval, banning political opposition was straightforward. The Nazis banned trade unions. These had traditionally supported the socialists and communists. Hitler ordered the arrest of trade union leaders, the ransacking of TU offices, and the banning of strikes. Political parties were also banned. The SA attacked the offices of the Social Democrats and Communists, confiscating their funds and effectively shutting them down. By July 1933, all political parties were banned, except of course the NSDAP. Further to this, Hitler closed down the 18 Länder parliaments, local governments, replacing them with Gauleiters and governors of his own choosing. The next key event is known as the Night of the Long Knives, and it comes somewhat later in 1934. There was a period of relative inaction from July 1933 to June 1934, as Hitler had already dealt with his main opponents. However, he was concerned that he did not have full control of the only remaining political party in Germany, his own Nazi party. Hitler wanted the support of the army, and the SA undermined that. After all, the army was limited to 100,000 men by the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The SA was 4 times that size. Hitler also feared that Ernst Röhm was threatening to overthrow him. Röhm supported more socialist policies, and the SA, 60% of whom were unemployed, were loyal to Röhm, feeling that Hitler had undervalued them. On the 30th of June 1934, Hitler began to arrest and murder his opponents, over 400 in total. Hitler lured Röhm and other SA leaders to a conference at Bad Weisse. Röhm and others were arrested on arrival. Röhm was pressured to commit suicide. He refused. Instead, Röhm was shot in prison. The violence didn't stop there. Into the next day, von Papen found his secretary shot dead and his home ransacked. He probably narrowly avoided being murdered. Hitler was not the puppet he expected him to be. Gregor Strasser and Gustav von Kahr, 2 earlier political opponents, were murdered by the SS. On July the 2nd, Hermann Göring publicly declared that Röhm had been killed as he was planning a revolution and it was in the best interests of Germany. There was never much mention of the other arrests and murders. Most of Hitler's political rivals were now either dead, incarcerated, or in concentration camps, or simply too terrified to resist him. The next key event was the death of Hindenburg. On the 2nd of August 1934, the elderly president of the Weimar Republic, Paul von Hindenburg, died. He was 87, and it was not unexpected. One of the last obstacles to complete power was gone. As a result, Hitler combined the president's powers with those of the Chancellor. He declared himself Führer or leader of Germany. He was now undisputed dictator. Having removed the threat proposed by the SA, the army agreed to pledge its support. The army swore an oath to support and serve Hitler. There was now nobody left to oppose him. A summary of our final points. Having secured the position of Chancellor on the 30th of January 1933, Hitler set about securing his power and creating a dictatorship. The Reichstag Fire on February the 27th, 1933 provided the excuse to clamp down on opponents. The March 1933 election increased the Nazis' seats to 288, effectively giving them control of the Reichstag. The Enabling Act allowed Hitler to pass laws and ignore the constitution without the approval of the Reichstag. Trade unions and political parties were banned, removing the Nazis' main political opponents. The following year, the Night of the Long Knives was a murderous purge of Hitler's remaining rivals, including inside the Nazi Party, Röhm and the SA. The death of Hindenburg made Hitler Führer of Germany. As a result, the army swore an oath of loyalty, no longer fearing the influence of the SA. So which events are the most important in creating Hitler's dictatorship? Historians disagree at what point Hitler gained full control of Germany, but we are certain that by August 1934 there wasn't really anyone left to oppose him, apart from other countries of course. His power would gradually increase over time until of course the Second World War started, and it was the Allied forces that eventually unseated him. That's the end of this video though. Remember what I said about liking and subscribe the videos and subscribing to the channel. It really is helpful when I'm dealing with this sort of content that is difficult to monetize and promote. So anything you can do to help is much appreciated. But for now, hopefully this has been useful, and thanks for watching.